Okay, well, yes. So thank you so much for having me. I love being able to come talk to people about self-care and about community care and being able to take care of ourselves as we take care of others. This is something that's really near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of work with first responders and helping them figure out how to navigate the kinds of trauma that they experience. And I think really across the board, we all have experiences of trauma. And we all have times where we need to sort of step back and take care of ourselves so that we can come back into it and take care of others. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'm going to kind of try to run through some information on trauma and some tips and tools and techniques for being able to take care of yourself, a lot of them being mindfulness techniques. And we'll try a few meditations, actually. I'll go through them quickly, but you have access to the slides, so you can always come back to them and use them for yourself. I'm fine with that. So let me, and some of this, there may be some things on the slides that don't quite fit for caregivers, family members of those dealing with mental health issues, because they are geared towards those first responders, but I wanted to leave them on there because I think it's really important information for us all to know just as a community. So I'll try to point out the highlights of things that are really particular to hopefully be helpful to you guys. So one of the things, working in the helping fields, one of the things that we recognize is that the way we grow is through crisis, right? So looking deeply within is really important and really valuable. And sometimes the only way we get to do that is through a crisis or through a difficult circumstance. So my specialty is actually non-normative grief. So a lot of the people who come to me have lost somebody to suicide or overdose or sudden death. And it's really the toughest time of their life, right? But they start looking inward and finding their strengths and figuring out who they're going to be after this. So it's a really beautiful thing to watch people come through crisis in that way. So let me give you a few definitions to start with. So burnout is when somebody's physically and emotionally exhausted because of their job. It usually has to do with not having a lot of job satisfaction and not having a lot of choice in your job. Beyond that, people who do things that are considered caretaking have a different experience when they become burned out, which would be compassion fatigue, right? So it's a profound and emotional physical exhaustion that you get because you're connecting with the person you're helping. It's not just a job that you're showing up to or a family member that you're spending time with. You're actually emotionally connecting with them, and it takes a lot of effort. Trauma exposure response is when external trauma becomes your internal reality. So when we're dealing with family members who might have mental health issues or dealing with caregiving, there will be traumas, right? And if that's happening over and over again with no chance to sort of reset, then that external trauma becomes the internal reality and you start to see problems, both physically, mentally, emotionally. So I love this quote from Kitchen Table Wisdom, that the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. Right? So when we are in situations of suffering and loss or difficulty, we protect ourselves. We distance ourselves from it, but that's what allows us to not be close to the good things in our lives. So finding ways to take care of ourselves, to deal with the compassion fatigue is really important so that we don't burn out. So let's look at some of the factors increasing risk for compassion fatigue. So people who are dealing with things that are acts of human cruelty. So when somebody does something that's just really unkind, right, it's a lot harder to process that and to walk away from that without it affecting our internal world. The more we're exposed to traumas or to difficulties, the more likely that we will become compassion fatigued. If there are other stressors in our lives, if there are things going on in addition to the caregiving role that we have, we're more likely to become fatigued. If we have a personal trauma history, and I don't know if you guys know this, but most people who show up to help anybody, it's because they've been in a situation of pain in their past. So most of us have that personal trauma history one way or another. When we don't have social support, that puts us more at risk of compassion fatigue. So it's really great when you're having something like this where people are coming together and talking to each other and supporting each other through the difficulties. If you have an anxiety-prone personality, I'm kind of a highly set person, right? I tend to be a little anxious, so I'm probably more prone to compassion fatigue and have to make sure that I take care of myself. When your expectations are too idealistic, you think you can do everything, take care of everybody, and never take care of yourself, you're going to be more at risk for compassion fatigue. And if you're doing what you're doing, the caregiving in isolation, again, without that social support or connection to others, you're more at risk of compassion fatigue. Now, there are some factors that reduce your risk, right? So the less often that you're exposed to any kind of trauma, or the less intense the trauma is. Somebody dealing with, I think when we're talking about like mental health issues, if you're caregiving for a family member who has schizophrenia or bipolar that tends towards psychosis, that's going to be increased dose to increased intensity of exposure. Somebody who deals with depression or PTSD could go either way. Somebody with anxiety, there might be less intensity, right? So those are things that would reduce the risk. If you're older, when you start doing the caretaking, that reduces your risk. If you have strong social support, good social network for reprieves between the exposures, when it's impersonal rather than interpersonal trauma. So in that way, when we're a family caregiver, that doesn't really apply because it's going to be very personal. If you have a calm, non-anxious temperament, that's going to reduce your risk of compassion fatigue. And if you have a willingness to look for meaning in suffering, right? So if you're willing to sit back and look at what's going on and say, what does this mean to me? You know, how do I use this to improve my experience? That's going to reduce your risk of compassion fatigue. And if you have greater experience in dealing with people who are having a difficult time, that helps. And if you have close connections with other people who are going through the same kind of situation. So there's the social support we can get just from friends and family, and then there's support from others who have a similar experience, and that's pretty specialized, and it reduces your risk. So then what are some of the warning signs of compassion fatigue? Sorry, I have to cough. So we have physical signs. So you're going to notice if you're starting to have compassion fatigue, you're going to be tired and you're going to begin to feel depleted. So it's not just like I've had a hard day and I'm kind of tired, I need to go to bed. It's that like bone weary, weary to just the bottom of your soul. That's concerning. You may notice insomnia or hypersomnia. So your sleep will change. You might be sleeping more, you might be sleeping less. You may notice headaches or migraines, right? So you're going to have tension in your body, and as you hold tension in your body, that's going to cause you to have more of those tension headaches and things like that. You have an increased susceptibility to illness, meaning you get sick more often, right? So if you notice that you're getting colds or your allergies are bothering you more, that might be a sign of compassion fatigue. Sorry, I have allergies right now, so that's what's going on. Somatization and hypochondria. So somatization is when your emotional stress becomes physical symptoms. So when people can't work through their emotional difficulties, the body's going to work it through for you. And so you begin to be ill. You might see people with like chronic pain, fibromyalgia, things like that. They're very real. It's a real physical symptom. It may have an emotional starting point. So Bessel van der Kolk, who's an expert in stress and stress response, talks about that our immune system doesn't exist in isolation, right? So our immune system responds to our emotional health. And then hypochondria, which has a bad rap, but at the end of the day, it's really just being hypervigilant about physical ailments. So a lot of times when we're caregiving for others, we may be more hypervigilant about our own health. If you notice yourself doing that, that also might be a sign of compassion fatigue or impending compassion fatigue. So then behavioral signs, right? So the physical signs, now we have the behavioral signs. So there might be an increase in a desire to use alcohol or drugs as a way of sort of settling, right? So unwinding, self-medicating, just kind of trying to settle down at the end of the day. If somebody's having a glass of wine a few nights a week, that's usually not a big deal. If it's something that somebody can't wait to get home to have that glass of wine, or they're having a bottle of wine, or it's every day, then I think you have to start looking at, why am I using this? What is this doing for me? You might see other addictions, so shopping, workaholism, overeating. Really, addiction is just a way to avoid a feeling or to find a feeling, right? It's a coping mechanism that we use, but it has a toxic result. You might see absenteeism, right? So people might be missing work because of the compassion fatigue. They may be angry or irritable, but usually that anger comes in minor events. Something really tiny happens and there's an explosion, that's a sign that somebody's becoming fatigued. One thing to really look out for, I think I noticed this in myself, right? When I'm overwhelmed, overloaded with caregiving or helping, I start feeling like I can't stop doing it. Like nobody else will do it. I have to do it, right? That's a sign that you have an exaggerated sense of responsibility, which is a behavioral sign of compassion fatigue. There may be avoidance of friends, families, this is clients, because we use this for clinicians. So that idea of just trying to stay away from the things that are taking from you, but doing it in a way that doesn't acknowledge that, hey, I'm kind of getting worn out here. There may be an impaired ability to make decisions. So just your brain gets kind of clouded when you're busy taking care of other people. And so it's hard to make decisions, or you may be making decisions over and over and over again for this other person. And so then it's decision fatigue, right? So you get to these easy decisions. What do you want for dinner? I have no idea. I can't decide, right? There may be some forgetfulness. Again, the parts of the brain that are working so hard to kind of keep things together and deal with the stress may make it where the memory is not working as well. You may notice problems in interpersonal relationships, so arguing more with a spouse or with family members, just having a difficult time with those close relationships. Attrition, people may quit their jobs or stop showing up. And there may be compromised care. And again, this is more for people working in a helper role, which, a lot of caregivers, you might be caregiving at home and caregiving at work. If you're a caregiver, you kind of do it everywhere you go. And then the silencing response. This is very particular to counseling, where when we're feeling overwhelmed, we may give silent cues to our clients to not talk about the things that are too difficult for us to handle. So I think in a caregiving role, that might look like sort of hinting to the family member that you're taking care of not to tell you what's going on or not to give you that information that would be stressful. It's a little harder to look for, but it's a really important sign. Psychological signs. So we've got physical, behavioral, and psychological, right? So psychologically, you may be emotionally exhausted. So again, that bone weary, right? You have the physical tiredness, but you may also have just exhausted in your mind, right? Maybe distancing, avoiding friends and family. You may start to feel bad about yourself. I can't do this well enough. I can't figure this out. It's my fault that this is happening. Sorry, this would be much better if it wasn't allergy season. You may have an insensitivity to emotional material. So when other people are talking about their problems, you may just not really want to hear it because you're sort of tied up in your own. You may have problems with intimacy. So struggle with showing affection or being in close proximity physically or emotionally with those you love. You may have a hypervigilance where you're worried about something happening, waiting for the shoe to drop, right? The other shoe to drop. There may be an inability to tolerate your own strong feelings or those of others. You may have an increased sense of personal vulnerability. There's a nice typo there in my slide. So an increased sense of personal vulnerability. You may just feel really worried about things and feel like you don't want people to know that you're struggling, right? Hypersensitivity to emotionally charged stimuli. So when someone's showing emotion, you just really want to shut it down because it's too much. It's overwhelming. You may have, I don't know if you guys can see this fly that is just driving me crazy. Reduced ability to feel sympathy and empathy. So kind of other people, this one for me, when I'm starting to feel fatigued from all of the caregiving, I stop being able to show up for the small things that people are dealing with. So if somebody tells me what's been hard in their day, in my mind, I'm sort of thinking, well, everything I heard today was way worse than that, right? And it doesn't matter because whatever they're coming to me with is important to them, and I should be able to show up, and I want to be able to show up. So for me, that's a really good sign that I'm overwhelmed and I need to step back. You may be showing cynicism and embitterment. So this is that idea of if you catch yourself, somebody's telling you about their life and you say, it must be nice, right? that's a sign that you're fatigued, that you need to step back and take care of yourself. We all deserve to be happy and whole and fulfilled. You may feel depression, so you may notice that and this may show up in physical symptoms or emotional symptoms, right? Being tired, not wanting to get out of bed, being sad, having sort of a negative worldview. You may have intrusive imagery, so this is if people are dealing with traumas and seeing things go on. They may struggle to put that out of their mind, so it may pop up at inopportune moments. You may have a loss of hope, right? You're taking care of someone, it's never going to get better. This is how it's going to be forever. You may have depersonalization, which is this sense of sort of being out of your body, and it's a bit of dissociation. Or you may feel resentment for doing the caretaking. And then, so I talk to my clients a lot about how at the end of the day, internally, we have this well, right? We have this inner space where we can go to dip into, to know our values, to know what we want to do, to make decisions in life. But when a well isn't maintained, it becomes overgrown, it starts to fall apart, and you can't use it for its true function. And that's the same for us. If we don't take care of our inner life while taking care of others, we're like an overgrown and unmaintained well, and we can't be used for our true function, which is to help others. So what do we do? What we want to look towards is stewardship. So stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something that's entrusted to one's care. So trauma stewardship is the practice of caring for yourself in order to remain effective and to avoid those negative effects of caring for others. So what does all that mean? All of that means is that you want to be sustainable, right? If you're a helper, if you're taking care of others, you're a caregiver, you want to take care of yourself so that you can continue to do that. If you give all of yourself, if you pour all of yourself out in this one relationship or this one part of your life, you can't even really do that effectively, right? Because you're going to run out of stuff to pour out. So taking care of yourself really does help to take care of the other. How do we do that? We want to make this caring cycle sustainable. So we want to find compassion for ourselves as well as others, empathy for ourselves as well as others, an understanding of our values and purpose, self-knowledge, and self-awareness, right? So a lot of self, right? Looking at yourself, thinking of yourself, pondering yourself, and finding ways to take care of yourself. One of my favorite quotes, Carl Rogers was a psychologist, and he was a psychologist. It's interesting that his last name is Rogers because he's a very Mr. Rogers character, just very sweet, very kind in all that he did as a psychologist. And he said, I've always been better at caring for and looking after others than I have been at caring for myself. But in these later years, I have made progress. So he was 75 when he started making this progress. So it's never too late to start taking care of yourself. So, in an effort to return to the self, we want to start with self-awareness, right? So, being in tune with your own stress signals, understanding your current feelings, your actions, your reactions, knowing why you're doing what you're doing, thinking about dynamics from your past that influence the present, so traumas in your history that are being played out now, and how do we deal with anger, hurt, and resentment. So, these are some of the questions I suggest people ask themselves, right? Is there a balance between nourishing and depleting activities in your life? Are there things that you're doing to make sure that you're refilling that well as quickly as you're depleting it? Do you have exercise, interests? Are you doing a personal debriefing? Now, so in the helping fields and first responders, there's debriefing that they do after calls, right? So you run through to see, could I have done that better? Is there anything that's kind of sticking with me after this call? I think it's a great way to look at the day, right? Take your time to look at what happened, what do I do with this, what do I understand about myself and others from the way this rolled out. Are you getting counseling, right? Counseling across the board, I mean, I'm biased, right? But I think everybody should get counseling. I'm a counseling professional. I own my own practice. I have 20 clinicians who work under me, and I have a counselor. So I see somebody to make sure I'm taking care of myself so that I can take care of others. I think it should be like having a primary care physician, that we should all have somebody we can talk to on a regular basis just to kind of sort out everything that's going on. Do you have social support, right? Are you creating that web, that interconnected web of people who can help you in times of need? And on the other side of things, how are you sabotaging your self-care? Do you make appointments for yourself to get your hair done, or to go for a relaxing walk somewhere, and then you don't do it, right? Because somebody else needs you. How often do you do that? And I think this quote here, right? So everything you do in life stems from the relationship you have with yourself. We cannot have truly close relationships with others unless we're having a truly close relationship with ourselves. So I suggest kind of having a self-care toolbox, so to speak, right? So kind of knowing what you can do, and I'm going to give you some things you can do so that you're taking care of yourself over time. One of the things might be to look at that list that I gave you of the various warning signs. What are yours? So different things happen for different people. Some people have more physical symptoms. Some people have more emotional symptoms. Looking at what are those? What are they for you? And how do you know? So on a scale of 1 to 10. So if I said one of the things that happens for me if I'm being overworked or overwhelmed is that I become very cranky, very irritable, right? On a scale of 1 to 10. So I need to say 1 is like I'm just a little bit like snarky, right? And 10 is when I'm saying outright unkind things that aren't normal to my character, right? So then what's a 4? What's a 9? How am I checking in with myself to know where I am at any given time? Having a regular check-in with yourself, right? So setting up a time to check in and say, how are you doing? What's going on inside? How are you feeling? When will you do that? Like, it shouldn't just be, yeah, I need to have a regular check-in. It should be like, Sundays at 2 o'clock, I shut the door, I go in the bathroom, or I go in my room, or I go outside, I go to a place where I'm by myself at this certain time, and I check in with myself, right? Thinking about what do you have control over, what do you have influence over, and what do you have concern about. So you can think of this in concentric circles. There are things that you have control over that you can actually do something about, right? Then you have things that you have influence over. These are things that you might be able to get somebody else to control. And then there are things you only have concern about. How do we let go of some of the concern and maybe some of the influence? Some of the concern and some of the influence, and really focus on what we can control, right? So we're not driving ourselves crazy with the things that we really can't do anything about. What are some of your enjoyable stress relief strategies? What do you like to do? One of the things, I used to work in a medication-assisted treatment center, and we would work with people, so it's people dealing with substance use, and we would try to come up with plans, like what are you going to do when you're being pulled back into that coping strategy of using a substance, right? And people would say, oh, I'm gonna go to church, right? I'm like, okay, well, can you go to church at 2 in the morning? Can you go to the church anytime you have a problem? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But finding, is that enjoyable? Do you want to do that? Like really thinking about what you like to do, what brings you relief from your stress. Are those things available to you? And how do you make sure you have something for any given time when you need to do it? What are some of your stress reduction strategies, right? So removing things that cause you stress, right? And then what are some of your stress resiliency strategies? So that's adding things that help you deal with stress. So on the one hand, we're going to want to take away things that cause us stress that we don't need to do. And then on the other, we want to add things that help us deal with the stress. So here's one strategy that I really like to use that I think is a helpful way to start kind of creating containment around your days. So when you're dealing with stressful situations, we can start the day by saying, what are my intentions for today, right? What am I going to do today? Let me just give myself 2 things that I want to accomplish today. And that may be getting through the day without yelling at anybody, right? That may be getting through the day. That may be resolving something. That may be finishing something. It could be anything, but something that's manageable, something that can actually be done in a day. And then asking yourself, where will I place my focus, right? What is it I'm going to focus on today? So I'm going to focus on keeping a calm, attitude all day long. That's going to be my focus, right? And how will I measure success? How will I know where those intentions and that placing of my focus, how will I know that I've done that? How will I be able to tell myself that I succeeded in that? And then at the end of the day, asking yourself, what can I put down? Like, what did I carry through today that I don't want to carry into tomorrow? With what am I ready to be done? Like, what is something that's just been hindering me for a long time and I just don't want it anymore? Can I put that down? Can I imagine myself putting it on a shelf and leaving it there? And what don't I need to carry with me another day? I think so many things, I love that quote, you were meant to climb these mountains, not carry them, right? The idea that sometimes we just sort of carry our hurts around with us when we have the opportunity at the end of the day to say, enough of that, I'm going to leave that here today. And I know there's a lot of things we can't leave, right? There are things that require us. But I think even in those situations, you could say, well, I'm going to set aside my resistance to approaching this thing, or I'm going to set aside my need for this to not bother me, right? Just something you can leave behind so that it's a little less stressful the next day. So now I want to move into some mindfulness-based techniques that can help you, and I'll run through some meditations for you. And they're all really easy. Meditation doesn't have to be all day. It doesn't have to be like total clear. I mean, you're never going to have a total clear brain. Like, that doesn't happen. It's not a thing. Maybe the Dalai Lama or the Buddha or somebody can do that. But the rest of us are going to have thoughts. It's more learning how to have them be a little bit separate from us, a little bit less intrusive. And Bessel van der Kolk here talks about the idea of interoception, which is the idea of understanding the messages your body is giving you, right? Understanding, hey, I have a little twinge in my leg, I'm a little uncomfortable there, what's going on? Oh, I have a little twinge in my emotional sense of the world, what's going on there, right? How can I start to understand my inner world and allow that to be something that I can gain some distance from and allow to be messages and not control me? So Rumi was a Sufi mystic, and he wrote this poem called The Guest House, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful poems ever. But I think it's the way we want to look at thoughts and feelings, right? So this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, a momentary awareness comes from an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So part of how I approach mindfulness is exactly this way. The meditative practices that I use are really meant for me to say, okay, what is my psyche telling me? What is my body telling me? What is my soul telling me? What are the messages that I can just look at and say, what's going on here? What can I do with this? How can I gain meaning from it? So we are going to roll through, and I have no idea where we are on time. I'll probably go through these pretty quick, but again, I'll have them for you so that you can use them, and you can find most of these online, probably with somebody with a more soothing voice than me, to be able to use. I think one of the things to remember at the end of the day is that you always have your breath, right? So you have these meditative practices that you can use, like metta meditation or Tonglen meditation, that are pretty specific and have a goal in mind, right? But at the end of the day, you always have your breath. And so it's a great place to start for grounding and stress reduction. So if this fly is going to make it this fly is going to make me be mindful, I guess. So before, like, if you're doing any meditation or breath work, you know, blow your nose if you need to, get comfortable, do whatever you need to do. And if you feel uncomfortable during the meditation, you can stop, you can pause, you can do whatever, nothing is wrong, right? You could do whatever you need to allow your body and your mind to be settled. So one of the most, and I'm not really going to run through this just for the sake of time, but a really good breathing meditation is 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, and then you hold your breath. So you've inhaled for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 7, and then you breathe out for a count of 8. All you have to remember is 4, 7, 8, right? And as you do this, it begins to settle the nervous system, and it brings you out of any fight or flight response that you may be experiencing. So I think even writing on a little piece of paper 4, 7, 8, and having that with you, so that whenever you need to breathe, you can do that, and you'll begin to bring the system back down, right? So, okay. So let's try, we'll actually do a little breathing meditation. Hopefully I won't lose my voice halfway through it. So this is a breathing awareness meditation. You use the 4 foundations. It's kind of set up a little odd on this slide, but I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to read through what you would do, and you would do this. You could do this 4 times. So we're going to do it once for body sensation. If you were doing this by yourself at home, you could then go back through it for feelings, and then you could go through it again for thoughts, and then you could go through it again to kind of expand into the world around you. So those are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So being able to, it allows you to sort of separate what you're physically feeling, what you're emotionally feeling, what you're thinking, so the meaning you're making out of those feelings, and then what's going on around you. So it's just a great way to approach it. So I can't see any of you, so I don't know. I assume everybody's sitting. So what I would say is you want to settle into a comfortable position. So this could be lying down, this could be sitting up. If you're sitting up, you want your back to be pretty erect but comfortable. You don't want anything to be crossed, so feet flat on the floor, uncross arms and legs, and you can gently close your eyes, or you can leave them open. If you leave them open, you want to look maybe just a few feet down in front of you softly, sort of like allowing yourself to zone out a little bit. And I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, hold it, and then you're going to breathe out. Take another breath in, hold it, breathe out. And keep breathing in that way. And I'd like you to bring your awareness to the level of physical sensation. Focus your attention on the sensation of touch and pressure where your body makes contact with the floor or the seat. There's a table in front of you. Feel your clothes on your body. Take another deep breath in. Hold it. Breathe out. Now bring your awareness to the changing pattern of physical sensations in your lower abdomen, so near your belly button, as your breath moves in and out of your body. As you breathe in, allow it to fill from the top of your chest down to your belly. And as you breathe out, let it go from your belly up through your chest. And if you need to, you can place your hand on your belly to feel the movement. And breathe in, hold it, breathe out. And one last time, breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. You could open your eyes if they were closed. So this is just a nice calming meditation to bring awareness to the breath and allow it to be grounding for you. There are apps that you can use. I I don't know if this will connect. We'll try it. I won't play the whole thing, but just so you see what this does is it does that breathing. It has you breathe in, hold it, breathe out, hold it. And it's got water in the background, which is very soothing to the system. Let's see if it'll work. So that is a great meditation to use. I think it's like 52 seconds, right? So it's really easy to fit anywhere into your day. And I think what it does too, it's really important to breathe in, notice the pause, breathe out, notice the pause. Part of mindfulness and part of meditation is learning to slow things down and to pause, to just sort of hold for a minute before reacting. And so doing this kind of breathing throughout your days off and on can help you build that skill, which is really useful in many situations. Oh, I don't know if we had two of those. Okay. So another meditation that you can do is called a loving kindness meditation. It's a metta meditation. And what you do, I'm going to have to do a meditation for this fly, is you pick 4 people. So you want to choose someone that's easy to love, someone for whom you're grateful. You want to think of someone that's sort of neutral. You don't really have a positive or negative feeling for them, maybe like the mailman or something like that. And then you want to think of someone who's more difficult to love, someone who sets you off. Not too bad though, for today anyway. And then think of yourself. So those are the 4 people. Somebody that's easy to love, somebody that's pretty neutral and doesn't really have a positive or negative effect on you, somebody who's a little more difficult to love and can be a little bit triggering for you, and then yourself. And we're going to work through this meditation, saying, may you be safe and protected, may you be healthy and strong, may you be truly happy, and may your mind be at ease for each of these people. So again, trying to look at the time again. I'm going to run through this one because the next one's a little harder. So I'll tell you about the next one and leave you with that, but this one we'll run through because I think it's a really good one, especially when you're caretaking. So I'm going to have you take a deep breath again. So breathing in, hold it, breathing out, breathe in, hold it, breathe out. Continue to breathe at a pace that's comfortable. I want you to sit comfortably, breathe naturally, and I want you to think of someone you care about a lot, someone who's easy to love, someone for whom you are grateful. And as you think of this person, imagine yourself saying the following to them. May you be safe and protected. May you be healthy and strong. May you be truly happy. May your mind be at ease. Take a deep breath in. Hold it. And breathe out. Now think of that person that you feel neutral about. Someone for whom you have neither strong positive nor strong negative feelings. As you think of this person, imagine yourself saying the following to them. May you be safe and protected. May you be healthy and strong. May you be truly happy. May your mind be at ease. Breathe in. Hold it. And breathe out. Now think of someone who's a little more difficult to love and someone who often sets you off. As you think of this person, imagine yourself saying to them, may you be safe and protected. May you be healthy and strong. May you be truly happy, and may your mind be at ease. Breathe in. Hold it. Breathe out. And now think of yourself and say the following. May I be safe and protected. May I be healthy and strong. May I be truly happy. And may my mind be at ease. And breathe in. Hold it. Breathe out. And one last breathe in. Hold it. And breathe out. So, you can open your eyes. This is a loving kindness. Right? It's supposed to build our loving kindness by taking people that it's easy to love and transferring some of that feeling onto the people it's more difficult to love, including ourselves, right? It's also a concentration practice, so it helps to build concentration by saying these lines over and over and over. Oh, I don't think you're seeing the whole screen because it just got wonky. Sorry about that. So the last meditation that I have that I'm not going to run through because this is it's a little more difficult. So it's a Tonglen meditation. So for Tonglen meditation, what you're really doing is you're breathing. This is an empathy building, compassion building meditation. You're taking in so you breathe in the difficult things and you breathe out the good things, which feels like the opposite of what we want to do generally. But what it does, it allows us to build compassion in our heart for those difficult things. So maybe as like a helper or a caregiver, what you might do, so you do your breathing in and breathing out, breathing in spaciousness, clarity, breathe out, breathing in feelings of heaviness, breathe out feelings of light, and then think about how you might feel as a caregiver, right? So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you breathe in all the people that are feeling overwhelmed. Imagine everybody in the world who might be feeling overwhelmed, and you hold it. And then you breathe out confidence in the ability to meet the needs of our loved ones, right? You're breathing in the difficult, breathing out the good and the helpful. And I find when I do this type of meditation, what it really does is to help me see how I'm feeling and what I need, right? It comes to me as I'm breathing. I'm feeling overwhelmed. What do I really need? I need to understand that I'm okay. And I can do this, and I'll be all right. So I think that's and you can definitely find some Tonglen meditations online to listen to. Again, it is a more difficult type of meditation, but I think it's a really valuable one. I don't know what happened to my screen, folks. So I think recognizing that we aren't always going to be able to meet the need that's in front of us and forgiving ourselves. Right? So to overcome any bitterness that may have come because you were not up to the magnitude of the pain that was entrusted to you. So knowing that you're doing your best job, and sometimes it's not going to be quite enough, but that's okay because you're doing what you can. And I don't know how much of this you guys are seeing because it got weird. So now this next part is going into taking care of each other. So recognizing that self-care is kind of a fallacy. At the end of the day, we need to continue to care for each other and to show up when others need it and to ask others to show up for us. So what does this look like? In the community, it looks like complimenting people for when they do kind things, having gratitude for when people help, giving people authentic feedback, empathetic listening, really listening with your whole heart, encouraging self-care in others, checking in regularly with anybody you know who's struggling, taking respite, so pulling back from being part of the community, and being involved in ongoing support groups such as this. And I think to remember that to love someone is to learn the song in their heart and sing it to them when they've forgotten it, right? So being able to remind somebody who they are in those moments when they're forgetting, and making sure that you have people in your life who can remind you of that. This is information on the various things I used. This is, and I think I shared this with you guys, there is a professional quality of life scale that can kind of tell you if you're becoming compassion fatigue. So I shared that with the organizers, and so I think they can send it out for you to go through and do it, and you can use this on an ongoing basis to see how you're doing, and check in and see if things are changing or how you're feeling about everything. And this is just for you to do later, and that's me.